it connected. I realized what I'm doing in terms of, in terms of teaching, in terms of writing, in terms of being a parent, is I'm following what is authentically given to me to do. And I'm just trying to do my best at it.
This is Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney Ann Jenkins. Hello and welcome to the 118th episode of Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about the inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. This episode, I have with me Lane Igoudin. He is a Ph.D. and the author of A Family Maybe, A Journey Through Foster Adoptions to Fatherhood. He has written extensively on foster adoption, parenting, and LGBTQ families for adoption.com, Forward, Jewish Journal, LGBTQ Nation, and Parabola, and spoken about his book on NBC's daytime show, syndicated radio shows, literary and parenting podcasts, as well as to live audiences on his 12-stop 2024 book tour. A Family Maybe received endorsements from US Congress members and senators and the president and CEO of Dove Thomas Foundation for Adoption. Best-selling writers like Janet Fitch and Greta Boris, parenting experts and social work professionals. Lane is a professor of English and linguistics at Los Angeles City College. I learned a lot from my conversation with Lane, so much so that we ended up talking way past the actual recording, and I really enjoyed our conversation, and it was very informative in insight into the adoption process and all that it entails, and his journey of becoming an adopted father. Enjoy.
Well, I'm ready, Whitney, so whenever.
All right, perfect. So the nature of my podcast is about following the inner authentic voice, or the duende, or the daimon, or that thing that drives you to make your decisions in life. And sometimes if you ignore it, it can wreak havoc. And if you follow it, it can reward you greatly. And so with the nature of what you're doing as a writer and sharing your wisdom and guiding people, one of the first things that I like to ask is, when is the first time that you can remember, like, realizing that you had an inner voice of your own that you were able to follow?
Um, well, I think that inner voice speaks to us in different ways and in different capacities. My book is about becoming a parent. And the first time I realized I wanted to be a parent was probably when I was a teenager, I think. I always saw myself as a future dad. The fact that I'm gay did not in any way diminish my commitment to becoming a father. And so I would say um, I grew up feeling different from others, as I'm sure is the story of many people. But in my particular case, I was born and grew up in Moscow.
Okay.
At the time, it was the Soviet Union, and so I came here with my family. So growing up being gay and Jewish,
Mhm.
in in that particular culture was definitely a recipe for being for feeling different and being different. And so I always to sort of to contrast that, I was trying to, I learned to appreciate uniqueness of other people, but I was also trying to be in tune with what is authentically me, who am I really, and I'm trying to follow that. So that didn't really come to me at a later age. I was always trying to follow that. So being a father was something I always wanted to be. I helped to raise my younger sister, and so it was such a joyful experience. Um, I mentioned in my book that I had a vision of myself as a single dad with two kids. Well, I am a dad to two kids, but I'm not single. I've been with my husband for almost 30 years now. So, but the prophecy was there. The prophecy was there. I knew I would never be complete if
Mhm.
I didn't have a child. If I didn't have a child. So this was a big part of it.
Okay. Yeah. if you don't mind, if you're not comfortable talking about this, what was your relationship like with your dad?
You might be surprised, but I'm actually very close to my dad, and we're very different people. We're very different people, but to this day, he lives in Northern California. You know, I came to the United States with my father's family, and we talk pretty much every other day. And we don't always understand each other, but we try. We try to understand, and I think at some very, very deep level, kind of a like beyond the words. I think he gets me more than when we try to verbalize what what we're trying to say. But yeah, he's been a tremendous experience. Really anchor in my life. On the other side, my relationship with my mother has been very troubled, and much of that is in my book because people think that. Well, they assume things. Think that a gay boy and a mom would be like very close together. Not the case. And then they also think that if there's a child in the family, then that will sort of like bring the family together. It may, or it may actually tear it apart too. And unfortunately, well, anyways, that's part of my story as well. Um, so yeah, that I would say that's it's been formative. But what's interesting is, and funny you should mention, I did not really grow up with my parents. My parents divorced when I was small, and I was raised by my maternal grandparents. And I just published an article in the Jewish Journal called "The Vanishing Bridge," um, which touches upon that because I grew up in a household where 1920s and 1930s were very, very much present. I kind of like it skipped a couple of generations till it got to me, because it just so happened that my grandparents raised me in their late 60s and 70s and then early 80s, and so there's this I had a very, very kind of unique in a way connection to the world of the Pale of the shtetl, in which they grew up in at the turn of the century, and so with that, it also kind of made me feel a little bit like a bystander, looking at the society, looking at the relationships, looking at the families with a kind of a critical eye, because you can't assume, you can't just take it for granted, and you begin to question, begin to query with a double E, what those institutions are. You know,
Okay, so what was your relationship with the Jewish culture as far as your relationship to spirituality growing up?
well, that has really undergone a transformation. I did not grow up religious. Our household was traditional, but not religious. I grew up without faith. But when my family moved to the United States and we reunited with our relatives who left Poland, about 6 decades earlier, we joined the very vibrant and Jewish community up in Northern California, and from that point on, I joined, I would say, the conservative movement, and I started to learn more and more about the history and which you would call the Jewish civilization, and religion too, faith as well. When we had kids, we started to raise them Jewish from a very young age. And because our kids are adopted, they underwent a formal conversion to Judaism. Um, so so I started to feel this opening, I would say, in my 30s, mid 30s, to faith. Um, so it wasn't just, you do this because you do it. You don't just, what is it? Live Jewishly, but you actually, it's like it becomes sort of in some ways, a kind of a very grounding center of your life. And I would say I really began to feel almost the physical presence of the divine, I would say, in my 40s, and it still didn't quite connect. So in 2019, um, following some very definitive experiences in my life. But in 2019, I studied at the rabbinical school in Jerusalem. I studied in the conservative yeshiva. I took their summer program, and there was a teacher there who taught us on a particular Jewish thinker of the early 20th century, whose name is Rav Kook, and whose photograph is right there, because he always inspires me. And she cited a quote from him, which said that the essence of the quote was that God puts a certain holy spark in us, in each and every one of us, a kind of a unique, authentic spark of divinity in us, which is, that's where we connect to something bigger than us. And, and if we believe in God, then it's our responsibility, it's our religious duty to follow what is given to us, no matter what the obstacles are. And when I heard that, it's like it was a revelation to me, because then it connected. It connected. I realized what I'm doing in terms of, in terms of teaching, in terms of writing, in terms of being a parent, is I'm following what is authentically given to me to do, and I'm just trying to do my best at it. So that's the spark went off at that point, and I've been writing a lot about Jewish mindfulness, spirituality ever since. I've actually published a monthly newsletter on Jewish mindfulness called Blessing the Sea, where I'm continuing to work with the sources and issues and things like that.
What a beautiful connection to the whole theme of this podcast and how relevant that is.
Um, I can send you that quote, but that teacher that taught us, her name is Yiska Smith, and she is a very well, she is a unique person. She is actually she's an Orthodox teacher, but she's also transgender. So she underwent transition late in life, and she is a force of nature in so many ways. So when she brought it in, it's like, it was like finally it all made, it put it all together. My spiritual earnings, my sense of the divine, but also kind of like finding my place in it, finding my place in the universe. I know it sounds really, really grand, but it was also in some ways very calming, because it was like I don't have to fight anymore. I'm like, I know who I am and I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you mind going back a little bit and maybe diving into your journey from the time like you moved to the US and what that experience was like to navigate getting to the point where you are now?
hmm Sure, sure. Well, I moved to the United States when I just turned 21. I almost turned 21 on the plane, and it was still the Soviet Union. So I'm in my mid 50s now. So I spent my entire adult life in the United States, and my entire, I went to two grad schools, and basically all my career, my family. So I would say California is my home, my one, and my physical home. My spiritual home is in Jerusalem, but my physical home is here in California. Um, and what it was like, I came as a very young adult. So in many ways, I would say my character, my personality were already shaped and formed. But I also came sort of, I really, um, I was, I couldn't tell you how lucky I feel that God gave me a chance to escape that society and that country, where I felt so oppressed. And unfortunately, I see how things are sort of like going back to the way they were there, from little that I know. But there was really no future for me there. And at the same, so coming to the West, coming into the free world, I was like a sponge, absorbing, new experiences, open to many things, and kind of working hard for it, because I came here with a with $100 in two suitcases. So but yeah, it was a um, yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell,
Yeah.
what else to tell you. I've never been back to, well, so the Soviet Union is gone, but I've never been back to Russia, so I'm sure it's changed a few times over in the 35, 36 years, I guess, 35 years since we left it. Um, but yeah, but one thing that besides, being, being out as a gay person and struggling, not so much with coming out. That I didn't have much of a struggle with that. The struggle was actually finding myself as an immigrant gay man in the gay community, where at that time there were so few points of cultural connections. There's so little. I mean, I had no gay friends. I didn't know anybody. We never had any, gay bars where I grew up. There were prisons for people like me. So so like it was a so trying to learn how this whole, universe sort of functions, that was the real challenge. I would actually reach out to my straight friends to guide me and teach me and tell me how, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to say? So things like that. So yeah, but at the same time, it was also this opening towards mindfulness and spirituality. There was also the Jewish side of it through my relatives and learning the liturgy and the conservative movement. But also, I started going to San Francisco Zen Center as far back as 1995, and so the sort of like the dual interest in mindfulness and faith, have continued, to this day. And so yeah, so it was exhilarating in many ways.
It seems that you landed in a spot that allowed you to embrace those parts of yourself that might have been a little more challenging if you had landed somewhere else in the US during that time.
Which makes you wonder, because this is where I think the divine comes in, the providence, is because I would say the biggest events in my life happened not because I made them happen, but because I think they were in some ways predestined for me. And then when they did happen, I mean, I acknowledged that, and I did my very best to
Yeah.
to to fulfill what I think I'm supposed to do. But still, the fact of finding out that we have family in the United States that goes back, for over 100 years and very much in touch with, discovering that, and when I was a teenager, what were the chances of that? One in a million, I would say. And then arriving in San Francisco Bay Area and then moving to San Francisco at age, what was it, 23, 24, living, on my own, and then I would say also meeting my partner, my husband, the love of my life. Honestly, I like the word lover. I really
Yeah.
like the word lover, my lover of 30 years, you
Yeah.
know.
How soon after you landed there did you meet him? Like what was your
uh, six
experience?
years later. I mean, so I've dated, a few people, and of course, living in San Francisco, that was not, being young and looking okay, and and living in San Francisco, was not a challenge to find people, but it was a challenge to find someone like him. Um, so um, so we met in '97, um, and it was beautiful. It was very romantic. The dating and all that. And so, yeah, yeah. But what I would say is the fact that it's not like, I was definitely not looking, honestly, for a companion, because for some reason I thought that I was not capable of a long-term relationship.
Do you think maybe because of the relationship that your parents had, that was part of the
Well, my My dad has been married now for several decades, and I think quite successfully. My mom was married two more times after my dad. It's not that, it's me. I don't want to. It's just me. But I didn't. I would usually leave. And I thought it's just me. But that's why I thought of, okay, I will have children, but I'll have them as a single dad.
Right.
because I don't think I'll be able to make a lasting relation to have a lasting relationship with anybody. But that all turned out to be just it was all in my head because I was connected to him, I was brought to meet him, basically by chance, but I don't think it's a chance at all. I don't think it was a chance at all that when we went into the process and we got certified, and for a whole year they've been matching us with all kinds of kids and sibling sets that were not right for us. And then there was a child who was abandoned in a foster home run by the same agency that was trying to find us an adoptable child, but that child was not adoptable. The child was actually, strictly speaking, not even in foster care, but she happened to be in one of the homes and then said, hey, there's this child, looks like she might be coming out for adoption. Would you like to meet her? And we said yes. Who would have known that? And I felt like, honestly, going back to that, which is our older daughter now, 20 years ago, that as much as she was sent to us, I think even more so, we were sent to her because she needed the kind of parents that we ended up being. And so we were sent to her to take care of her, in a way. So I don't look at those things as random or just chances. No, no, no. But I think it's also important to not just to receive the gifts, but also to cultivate the relationship through whatever it is that you do to have a relationship with God. So that's where religion comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. How old was she when you adopted her into your life?
Well, we took her in. When we met her, she just turned one. So she was a crawling, basically infant at that time. And we took her over as her foster parents. We're foster adopt parents. So we took her over with intention to adopt. And only then the court detained her because she had already been unofficially in foster care. She had been abandoned 5 months earlier.
Mm.
But it was just for various reasons. I just don't want to kind of get into the logistics of it, but she was not the ward of the court yet. So she became while she was with us. But there's something else about it where it's also and that comes pretty early on in the book, that her birth mother reappeared on the scene shortly after she was placed with us, and the judge issued an order to keep the baby, our daughter Mariana, in her original foster home. Well, by the time the judge's order trickled down through the county to us, she had already been living with us for 3 weeks. So if everything was just like, done, perfectly and right away, we would have never gotten her. So again, am looking at that. Well, the fact that she came to us and she came to us even like was, literally within a couple of days, we would not have been able to get her if things really worked out the way they were supposed to work out. So I think that in a way, yeah, it was meant to be. So yeah.
What was that like for you to have her come into your life and have this prophecy or something, as you had mentioned, fulfilled? Like what was that understanding like for you?
Um, you know, we were in the process for a year at that. I mean, we had gotten certified and we have completed our home study a year earlier. So from that point on, we're being matched and this and that. So what I'm saying is, once we met her and we started to visit her in her foster home, and then we brought her home for a full day visit, and basically, so things, it kind of set, and we said that we will take her in. So it set the wheels in motion for her to move in and become our foster child, and hopefully, to adopt her later out of the foster system. Um, I was scared, to be honest, because there was a combination of you know there is a metaphor that, well, not quite a metaphor actually. I think, like, okay, I'll say this. Okay, I'll just put it out there, and you think what you want about what I'm going to say. When a woman is pregnant, she knows her child is coming, right? So she would know her child is coming because she's pregnant. The child is growing, and the child it will inevitably have to come out. In a way, that's how I was feeling like she's here. We are taking her, but is this the right thing? Are we ready? Like all that was a bit of a panic.
Yeah, you were holding space.
Even though I knew that no, we're not going to say no, 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 no. She's moving in, but oh my God. So,
Uh-huh.
so I'm just being honest. So this, yeah, is she the right child for us? Are we the right parents for her? Do you think we can handle it? Like, even though this was all just kind of me verbalizing my fears while I knew, I mean, I knew that no, 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 she's coming in. We're not, not, nothing's going to change. But
Yeah, was there a moment that surrender came into play where your faith connected with that you were able to relax into accepting that what was going to come would be what was meant for you?
I don't think I remember that moment because honestly, the 24/7 caretaking overtook me. It was also was there's another aspect to sort of like looking for authenticity, authentic way was that professionally at that time. I was working in communications. I was public affairs officer with a business school at Cal Poly Pomona. Um, but the thing is, at about age 30, also I realized that this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I mean, I'm okay, I'm good at it, but it pays my bills. But it's not like it's not where my career is going to be. And I realized I had this a different type of epiphany about what I really wanted to do was to teach language. And so I went back to graduate school, went to back to grad school, and so I was working so at the time we took in Mariana, I was working full time as a public affairs officer, but I was also teaching business English in my business school. I mean, it just so happened just down the hallway from my office. And I was also completing my master's in teaching English as a second language. Well, actually, master's was in linguistics with the option in teaching English as a second language at the same time. So as things sort of intensified, and her mother reappeared, as I mentioned, pregnant. So that um, the county asked us if we would take the newborn, and we said yes, of course, we'll take her sister. And so then, just to give you sort of a timeline on this, when our younger daughter was born, and then she was brought to our house. That was June 6th. June 10th, we had the college commencement where I was working, which I had been preparing for 4 months because I was a commencement director.
Right. Yeah.
June 15th, I was graduating with my master's in linguistics and teaching ESL. And all of it had to happen because I was already teaching two classes. And for my contracts, and they contracted me for the fall. So for me to be able to leave my employment and just become a freeway flyer, teaching English as a second language, I had to graduate. I really had to graduate. So it was a perfect storm. It was a perfect storm, but we made it through. We made it through in one piece. So the baby was born, was brought to us. We had a newborn and a toddler in the house, and just the two of us. No, almost no experience, no support. Just the two of us. I quit my job at the university. I quit a very nice job just to teach language. And I started teaching at four different colleges, and then later I became, I got a tenure job at one of them, and so things fell into place.
You wrote a book about your experience.
Yes,
So what was it about that inspired you to write the book?
as you probably noticed through bits and pieces that I told you about our family journey, um, things did not go as planned. And this is something that I would say anybody who is considering foster adoption should really count on is that just be, be ready for the unpredictable, basically, because you never know which way things are going to go. It may be a very sort of streamlined, painless process, and like some of our friends, you'll sign your adoption papers in 7 months. It may be a roller coaster, uphill battle that we experienced for 3 years. And so what happened was that we went into the process, and we had multiple options available to us to become parents. We could have gone through surrogacy. We both were working professionals, so we could have pulled it off financially. We could have gone international because there were some countries that would allow international adoption at that time. We could have gone through private adoption, where you get matched with a birth mother who is looking for to place her newborn. Um, or we could have gotten the foster adoption route. And we definitely wanted foster adoption because we wanted to bring in a child or two from this community. We wanted to us, it was more than just kind of extending our family, but it was also kind of, I don't, again, it sounds a little grand, but making the world a little better. Why should we produce more children or go out, half the way across the world to bring in a child here? We're like 30,000 kids right here in Los Angeles that need a home. Why don't we just provide a home for one or two of them, and be their forever family? That was the idea. But when we went into the process, and especially after the placement of Mariana, things started to go kind of sideways. Things started to go wrong in many ways that we didn't know about it and didn't expect. And I decided to document that and kind of share this experience because there was nothing on the market that you could read that, what should you do when you're adopting from foster care and things go wrong. And so I thought whatever will happen, because our family was in the danger of being broken up quite a few times throughout the process. Whatever will happen at the end, I will write about it and I will share my experience. Well, what really happened was that we ended up adopting our kids, um, in the end, but I couldn't write about it. I couldn't for 4 years. I couldn't face it. It just like the documents sat in boxes in the garage. My emails were there, and the last thing I wanted to do was to see any of this. I was very burnt, very, very, very much burnt with the whole experience. And so it was only like about 4 years later that I just like with kind of with some curiosity, I started to explore what was in those boxes, and I started writing little bits and pieces. And then I decided, okay, well, I can really stitch a narrative here. And then it took me 8 years,
Wow.
8 years to write this book and revise it, revise it, revise it, rewrite it. So until it got to the point that I felt like, okay, now I think I'd like to see if anybody would like to publish it.
Yeah, what was the writing process for you like as far as connecting with that divinity that you were describing earlier?
Well, that's what's interesting. And by the way, I just wanted to mention that this is not the story of my life. It's not an autobiography. It's specifically the story of that family building experience in those 3 years, and the transformation that all of us
Mhm.
underwent during that time. Um, what's interesting is that as I mentioned to you, I began to get closer to the divine, to the divinity as I got older.
Yeah.
So there was also a growing disconnect between Lane, who lived through those events that is writing this in the first person, right? And Lane, who's actually writing it down, who's, 8, 10, 12 years older and is not the same person anymore. And so I got really interested in the sort of like dialogical relationship between the two. And I actually wrote a memoir of a memoir called The Legal and the Human, which came out as a chapter in this book on literary studies of it's called Writing as Performance, accounts of autoethnography, where I'm actually exactly exploring that divide, that the dialogue between the two parts of the same person, and sort of like this growing space between them and what's emerging in that space. So as I became more rooted in my faith, I, of course, I began to look more at, well, it wasn't just, I started bringing kids to Parent and Me classes when our older daughter was 3 and our younger one was in the car seat. Okay, so it was, and as they got deeper, I mean, as they started to learn about, Jewish tradition, and I would take them places, and go to the retreats, go to regular Shabbat dinners and things like that. Um, I would go deeper into that as well. But it didn't start with the kids because John and I already started having, Shabbat dinners, I would say at least 5 years before we even had the kids. And my sister was very much part of that. So, yeah, I felt I was guided. I was guided to do what I was doing. And that sense of connection grew.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned about maybe reading a chapter from your book.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I would love to. I would love to. I'm going to read the first chapter from my book. My book is called The Family Maybe, and the first chapter is called Curbside Delivery. But actually, the original title was 666 because it was June 6, 2006, when the social worker brought the baby to our house, and that's what this chapter is about. And that will give you sort of a taste for the book and for what we're going through. It was on a hot early summer afternoon, just before the breezes would begin blowing inland from the ocean, that Jonathan shot me an irritated sideways glance. Where is she? Didn't she say early in the morning? That was hours ago. What's taking her so long? A 6'3" athlete with the face of the Bridgerton lead, my partner John was lining up daisy patterned onesies and burp cloths by the bassinet in the baby room. I had heard him vacuuming this room earlier, and before that tidying up the crib and the toys in the baby room upstairs. Patience, dear, I sighed. Give her a few more minutes. She should be on her way. Like John, I was trying to control my anxiety by being useful, yet I couldn't help rushing to the window every time I heard a car drive by. Jackie Willis, our designated Los Angeles County social worker, was neither here nor responding to my calls. Did the county change its mind? Did they release the baby to her mother, Jenna? We had been living with this uncertainty for months. Jenna was due around Memorial Day, but with office closures and Jackie out on medical leave, the baby could have gone to the wrong home. But that Memorial Day, I received a phone call from Babushka, my Russian speaking grandmother. Mazel tov, she announced. Your Jenna gave birth today. Well, how on earth do you know that? We've heard nothing from the county. I just know, she said in her raspy, confident voice. Так что не волнуйся, сам увидишь. Don't worry, you'll see it for yourself. I relayed her announcement to Jonathan, and he chuckled at my dear 84-year-old grandma, our closest ally in the family. I chuckled too, but deep down I felt even more anxious. What if she was right? I had no experience raising a newborn, nor did John. Zero. We had been trained and certified, but that was all just textbook learning. Were we really about to become caretakers of a tiny, fragile life, 100%, 24/7? What were we getting ourselves into? 3 days later, a social worker called from the hospital with the news that the baby had been born on Memorial Day at noon, just as Babushka had said, but couldn't be released yet. She had sepsis, a potentially fatal blood infection, and had to be put on medication. Other arrangements had already been made by Jackie's Department of Children and Family Services. The newborn would not be released to her mother. Instead, she would be detained. Detained means put in the court's protective custody and placed with us as an emergency foster home. The baby would remain with us as her long-term foster parents, while Jana would be given an opportunity and resources to reunify with her child. Sepsis made it easier for the county to carry out its plan. Jana recovered quickly and was discharged home to continue, as we were told, with her drug rehab and counseling. Meanwhile, the baby was improving on antibiotics while the court, on the county request, formally detained her. But Janet came back to breastfeed, and the nurse leaked the secret. Devastated and desperate, Janet refused to leave, pleading with the staff to let her take her baby home. On June 6th, the phone rang. "I'm on my way to the hospital," Jackie yelled over the freeway hum in the background. "Jenna's still there?" "Oh, yes, still there, camped out, refusing to leave. She knows I'm coming to get the baby." Poor Jenna. I couldn't imagine how she would feel or what she would do once Jackie got there. My chest tightened, and it was becoming real for us too. After all these months, really real, our life was going to split into before and after. At 4:30 p.m., a black SUV pulled up to the curb in front of our house. "Jackie?" John ran out the front door. I followed him out onto the porch and into the blindingly bright afternoon. Jackie didn't hand the baby over, but waited for John to take her out of the car seat inside her vehicle. Liability reasons, I assumed. In John's hands, the baby looked small, like a delicate light brown doll, her face no bigger than John's palm. All she had on was a pink onesie with the word "baby" embroidered in white across the chest. Despite my hesitations, a strong affection washed over me the moment I saw her, barely awake, helpless, innocent. And John just melted. Eyes on the baby, breathlessly, he carried her into the house. Jackie looked a bit shaken. Jenna had confronted her in the parking lot, yelling, accusing her of betrayal. Jackie handed me the cooler bag with several bottles of formula and a 3-inch binder with medical information and placement papers. The baby and the bag. No baby blanket, nothing else. And then she glanced at her watch and said, "I gotta go, guys. Trying to beat the rush hour." I thanked her. Jackie got back into her SUV and left. It was done. I found John inside the hallway, standing still with the baby in his arms, awestruck. Keeping his eyes on her, he passed the infant to me. Then he picked up his car keys from the dining room table and headed out. I knew he would be back in a few minutes and not alone. And by not alone, I mean that he'll be back in a few minutes with her sister, picking her up from daycare. So the reader at the beginning of the first chapter says, "Wait a minute, you just told us about the baby. Who is this other child?" And so
Oh,
then I begin to kind of move forward with the story, but also kind of giving the reader some of the background as to how we ended up with 2 kids in our house on that day.
yeah, that's beautiful and very cinematic. Like I could see it playing out in my mind as you read it, and that's a
Thank
compliment
you, Whitney.
in
Thank
your
you.
mind. So thank you for sharing that.
Um,
Yeah, if people would like to purchase your book and read further, where could we guide them to?
it's published by Traditional Press. Um, uh, and so you can find it on Amazon Bookshop. If you'd like me to sign it for you or sign it for someone else, you can also find it. You can get on my website, and I'll be happy to sign it for you and mail it to you. Or, like I said, any online source would do. Some bookstores too. I was just blown away when I walked into an independent store, bookstore in Santa Barbara, where our younger daughter is a student now. She's at UC Santa Barbara, and because I wanted to arrange for a book reading, and I said, "Oh, we have a couple of your books here on the shelf." I'm like, "Oh, great,
Oh,
it's real, it's happening."
you're getting around.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
All of those links into the show notes so people can click on them really easily. And is there anything that we haven't covered yet that you feel like is on the top of your mind or your heart that you would really love to share?
Um, a family maybe. My memoir is a book that I never planned to write. Because I've written and published quite a bit as a linguist, and also by teaching languages and ethnography and things like that. So, and once I completed the draft, this is where I felt this kind of a chain of events began to happen, where I was sort of like I kind of got on this on the ride and just kind of kept with it. Where I went to a writers' meeting in Los Angeles. I met there a poet, and she became a very good friend of mine, who said, I told her about my book, and she said, "What you really should do, you should go to something called AWP, which is the nation's largest literary conference. It's called Association of Writers and Writers Programs. And because your book would be good for a small press or a university press, I said, let me try that. So I went to AWP, and when I went there and I presented my book, I had kind of put together a little booklet. I do have some marketing background. I walked away with 6 requests for the manuscript, and I ended up with 3 offers on the book. So I kind of like I was just following, you know, 'cause I felt I was being moved into that direction. I was just following that direction. So it was so in that sense, I kind of feel like, you know, I'm not, I wasn't driven to write because I feel like I'm a writer, I should be writing. No, I feel like I need to tell the story. I need to get the story out. I want to share the story because the story is very compelling. And that really drove me to writing. And but that impulse I think kind of came from somewhat externally. And I've been following that ever since.
Excellent. So I have one last question that I ask to wrap up the conversation. And it can either be one word or a sentence or go on for a little longer, and it doesn't matter either way. But that is, if your inner voice had a billboard, what would it say to the world?
I would say, listen to me. It sounds silly, but listen to me. Don't, you know, I feel that, you know, I'm in my middle age now. I feel that I have had a relatively fulfilling life exactly because it's been authentic.
Mhm.
And it's been authentic because, like I said, I was looking at things from a little bit from the outside. Don't, I mean, I notice, and of course it hurts or it supports me, but ultimately I do not pay that much attention to what other people say or think or you know think I should do. But instead I try to get the sense for what is it that I'm supposed to do, you know, and that sense is inside. It's inside. It's that small uh small voice. And so listen to me. It will guide you.
Um, Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story and your wisdom. I really appreciated that. And I am excited for other people to discover your work as well.
Thank you, Whitney. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you're listening and you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and rating this podcast, as it really helps get this podcast out to other people who might be interested in hearing it but don't know about it yet. And also, if you'd like to contact me or reach me, you can reach me at unconditioningpodcast@gmail.com or unconditioningpodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much. And until next time, stay tuned in to you.